This video will explain the story of Elden Ring's DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree. We'll not only be looking at the main quest and the implications of its ending, but also some other important side stuff that the game shows us. This should give you a basic understanding of what happened within the DLC. As always, I want to offer a quick spoiler warning. This video will cover the entirety of the DLC, so make sure to beat the final boss first and then return. You also won't need to worry about your knowledge of the base game story, as anything relevant to the topic at hand will be mentioned in the video, and a couple of weeks from now I plan to put together a large story analysis video encompassing both the stories of the original game and this DLC all fit into one package. That video will go much more in depth on the game's story than this video, going over the themes and messages within them and even delving into some more obscure topics about the lore, so check back on the channel for that. As always, like the video if you enjoy and subscribe if you're new. Feel free to check out my content while you're here, which consists of story explanation videos like this and other story analysis and critiques on a variety of games, some of which even include the Souls games. With that out of the way though, thank you for watching, and let's get started. So first, to start the DLC, Mohg and Radahn must be killed. Outside of the simple fact that Majula is directly behind Mohg in the boss room, their deaths are required for lore reasons which I'll get into later. Right next to the cocoon is Lady Leda, who along with her compatriots are all here to seek out Majula. This congregation is a real ragtag group. Leda herself is a Needle Knight, who according to the Lacerating Cross Tree talisman were knights who serve Majula. Freya is a Redmane who fought alongside General Radahn. Hornsent belongs to those within Belarut, the Tower of Shadow. Sir Ansbach was a former pureblood knight who served under Lord Mohg. And the other two, Mor and Tiolier, while not affiliated with any specific group, do have some odd quirks about them. Mor is the group's provisioner, supplying tools and food when needed, and Tiolier dabbles in a variety of poisons. It's a team outfitted with all kinds of important features, from suppliers to warriors to knowledge seekers, all of whom are united under one goal of finding kindly Majula, which becomes our goal too. Before we press on, we should answer the more pressing questions that come from this DLC, mainly the location itself. The Land of Shadow is a long-forgotten land next to the Erdtree. According to the Shadow Realm runes that draw from the enemies, the Erdtree is quite simply the shadow of the Erdtree. Its placement on the map might be closer than you think, as a unique location called the Suppressing Pillar located in the Gravesite Plain states that the pillar is located at the center of the lands between. It's more than likely under these clouds, which connects to the veil placed over the tree, as this place is meant to be hidden. The Shadowlands is meant to be the opposite of the lands between. The lands between, even post-shattering, is beautiful and ornate. Contrast this to the Shadowlands where death is everywhere. There are thousands of spirit graves and coffins scattered throughout the land. The spirit grave stone states that the dead have been brought here since antiquity, and the map of the southern shore states that the land is filled with stone coffins of unknown origin. So death seems to always find its way here. This stench of death seems to have also found its way to America, and is likely why the Shadowlands are meant to be hidden from the rest of the world. Behind the Shadow Keep is a small location called the Shaman Village. This place is abandoned save for two items, a spell called Minor Erdtree and a golden braid of hair. Both items are related to Marika, implying that she lived in this village. The name of this village is important, however: Shaman. The only reference to a shaman in this DLC is a ghost talking to a shaman who's going to become a saint. However, the process of this involves being stuffed into a warrior jar. The Tooth Whip describes part of the grueling process, in which they would whip them vigorously so the wounds would ripen and grow inflamed, oozing pus as a result. The Minor Erdtree spell says, quote, Marika bathed the village of her home in gold, knowing full well that there was no one to heal. I believe that the people of her village were tortured and might have been the catalyst for Marika's eventual conquest. Her golden braid says, quote, Queen Marika's offering to the grandmother. What was her prayer, her wish, her confession? There was no one left to answer, and Marika never returned home again. Marika likely wished death upon those that took her people, which likely led to what we saw in the story trailer, where Marika approaches the gates of divinity and ascends to godhood. This same gate is the arena for the final boss, and we can see that while there is certainly less blood than before, the bodies that coat up the room have horns, meaning they were Hornsent. The Hornsent are the people of Belarut, sometimes known as the Tower of Shadow. The people of the tower embody a lot of the qualities from the Crucible. Horns here are seen as divine, whereas those with horns in the lands between, like the Omen, are treated with hatred and disgust. To get revenge, Marika had her son Mesmer lead a crusade into the Shadowlands to kill all those who lived here. Mesmer's army came stocked and ready to fight. Alongside the usual rank and file were the Black Knights, a band of soldiers who served under Mesmer, as well as his personal guard called the Fire Knights. But this crusade seems to have been a collaborative effort, as Mesmer and his men can be found stationed next to Omen Killers, Carrion Knights, and mages from the Academy of Raya Lucaria. One of these Carrion Knights was the twin Moon Knight known as R'hllana. Now, stay with me folks, this is going to get a bit confusing. but R'hllana is the younger sister of Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon. Unlike Rennala, who became a Carian queen, R'hllana disavowed her birthright and chose to fight alongside Messmer, which could explain the dual elements in her blades. It's clear though that this conquest was not just a small personal vendetta but a large-scale war where numerous houses and factions joined together. The result of this was nothing short of brutal. Messmer and company completely decimated the Shadowlands. Belarut is destroyed with only a spare few inhabitants walking around the rubble. Villages and towns are now in ruins. Furnace golems carry the corpses of the Hornsense to strike fear into them, and Messmer's flames can still be found scorching the ground all these years later. The entire land is a mess, with scarce remnants of life existing. But while the immediate results are apparent, the consequences of this war still exist, like flickering embers from a long-dead flame. Messmer's flames may have inadvertently caused some outer gods to make themselves known to the world. At the location called Prospect Town is a large group of these beings called Blood Fiends. Nearby is a talisman called Outer God Heirloom, which reads, "A talisman engraved with the lore of an outer god. The clan, who lost everything in the Great Fires, peered upon the corpse of their ancestor, normally an act of sanctity, and saw in its shadow a twisted deity. The clan had suffered such torment that the horrible thing was taken as an object of worship." So it's clear that this clan worshipped a deity of some kind. The Bloodfiend Hexer and Sacred Spear spell out the rest of the story. Quote, "Long ago, a subjugated tribe discovered a twisted deity amongst the ravages of war, and they were transformed into blood fiends. The Mother of Truth was their savior. And sacred spears of blood are the instruments of communion with an outer god. The Mother of Truth desires a wound." This outer god is without question the Formless Mother, the same one Mohg served under, as his items mention how a wound is made when communing with her. The other outer god may have been the Scarlet Rot, as Ramina, one of the DLC's main bosses, discovered a twisted divine element inside a church after it was burned to the ground, which she then weaved into the baleful Scarlet Rot. Her spell, Rotten Butterflies, also says that while the Scarlet Butterflies are a part of the Goddess of Rot's wings, they didn't have a master, so Ramina reached out to them instead. Now, I am in no way suggesting that Messmer's conquest birthed these outer gods. Rather, this event is what made them appear. The outer gods are formless beings with very little knowledge about their existence, but it's fair to assume they've existed for years, far before any of this happened. They just decided that now was the time to bestow their gifts onto these people. To make matters worse, this crusade seems to be a one-way trip, as everyone involved in the crusades was left here to fend for themselves. Marika has not been in contact with them at all and has seemingly abandoned her own child. Marika refused to let what happened here come to light, so Messmer is being used as a tool to make sure word never gets out. The lands between and its demigods get to continue on like normal, while an entire group of people are busy fighting for a crusade they can never come back from. These are some pretty horrific revelations, but one that ultimately makes the conquest for Miquella all the more concerning. What exactly is he doing here? Why come here in the first place? Well, if you manage to make it to the Shadow Keep, the entire plot is spelled out right in front of you. Two members of the group, Sir Ansbach and Freya, have quests that lead them here. Within this room is a scroll that describes the steps for a secret rite that's used at the Gate of Divinity, saying, quote, "A lord will usher in a god's return, and the lord's soul will require a vessel." Sharing this info with Ansbach and Freya explains the rest.
Well, what's this? Yes, I should have known. Even the truth was itself mere folly. As if using Lord Mohg to gain entrance to the land of Shadow were not enough, he plans to use his corpse as the vessel of his king consort. He has forsaken Lord Mohg's soul. He desires only his empty shell. It beggars belief, but I'm afraid Tender Miquella fails to grasp the humiliation implied by this act. One thing is certain. My dear lord deserved better.
From Sir Ansbach? To me? What on earth could it... Oh. Yes. Of course. I see. As the Festival of War concluded, General Radahn's soul met an honorable end, but kindly Miquella wishes to revive it, which is fine by me. I know it would pain old Jeren, but war has always suited General Radahn best, and certainly far more than any honorable death. Endless war to invigorate the soul, as befits General Radahn, the Great Lion.
So Miquella plans to use Mohg's corpse as a vessel for Radahn's soul, so that he can revive Radahn and have him be his consort when he ascends to godhood. This not only explains why these two needed to die before the DLC could start, but also recontextualizes the entirety of Mohg's actions. Instead of taking Miquella of his own volition, he was seemingly bewitched into doing so by Miquella so that he may enter the Shadowlands. This could also explain why he needed to get into the Shadowlands in the first place. As we talked about earlier, death seems to drift here from all over the place, so Radahn's soul could have found its way here, although that's just speculation on my part. But it's clear that Miquella is not as kindly as the game portrays him, as he's quite literally following in the footsteps of his mother, yet assumes this time it will be different. He wants to ascend the steps of the Divine Gate and become a god, to right the wrongs that Marika imposed on the people here and in the lands between, even though he's willing to charm people into doing what he wants them to do. This is further reinforced by an event that occurs earlier. On your way to the Shadowkeep, the sound of a rune arc will play with the message saying, "A great rune has broken, and so too has a powerful charm." Talking with the NPCs reveals that Miquella shattered his great rune, and that the charm he put on everyone was shattered. This would explain why so many of us, despite being from all walks of life, decided to band together, because Miquella was forcing everyone to. Well, everyone except us. Now that the charm has worn off, we can now hear the real feelings of the NPCs, and it takes a whole 5 minutes for the group to delve into chaos. Sir Ansbach remembers the time he challenged Miquella in honor of Mohg and was swiftly defeated. More questions why Miquella abandoned us. Hornsent and Freya are surprisingly fine, although the latter wants to look into a vow between Radahn and Miquella. Letta suspects that people within the group are going to betray us and is going to hunt them down, and Tiolier is worried about Saint Trina. Miquella has crosses placed throughout the Shadowlands which we're using as guides to follow in the literal steps of Miquella. Each of these crosses explains what Miquella removed from his body to complete this rite. Things like his flesh, arms, fears, doubts, and even his love. He's divesting himself of everything to start fresh, which includes breaking his great rune. This event eventually transpires out of control and leads to the group having a massive fight. Once R'hllana, Messmer, and Ramina are defeated, you can use Messmer's kindling to burn the thorns that have previously blocked the upper part of the Tower of Shadow. Towards the top is Lady Letta, who ambushes you along with her allies. Depending on a variety of factors, this fight can not only be much harder than it's supposed to be, but you can also come equipped with allies of your own. The default combatants are Lady Letta and Dryleaf Dane. Dane is a Dryleaf who abides by a strict code of faith and also seems to serve Miquella. But the others include Hornsent, Morn, and Freya. Hornsent's whole goal in this DLC is to kill Messmer to get revenge for his people. Regardless of whether you summon him for the fight or not, he will join Letta as his vengeance couldn't be quenched, and now he points his sword towards Marika, the Erdtree, and anyone associated with it. Freya only joins if you finish her quest, as she wants Miquella to revive Radahn. And Mor will join if you encourage him to stand tall despite Miquella abandoning him. The reason for their opposition is twofold. We are not only threatening Miquella's reign, but we're here to represent the Erdtree. Letta learns that we, unlike everyone else, weren't charmed by Miquella, and so assumes that the only reason we came here is because of the guidance of grace. Something that is indeed true. Guidance can be found pointing us towards the next main boss, just like the base game. We may not agree with Marika and the Golden Order, but in trying to become Elden Lord, we are inherently opposed to Miquella's rule. As for you, both Ansbach and Tiolier can be called in for assistance if they finish their quests up to this point. Ansbach doesn't want his former lord's body to be desecrated, so he joins us in the fight against Miquella, and Tiolier wants to stop Miquella because of Saint Trina. Saint Trina was a character who was briefly mentioned in the base game as someone who has something to do with sleep incantations. It was always theorized that Miquella and Saint Trina were one and the same, and this DLC confirms it. Down beneath the Cerulean coast is a cave that houses Saint Trina. A cross of Miquella nearby says that this is where he removed his love in reference to Trina. And after defeating the final boss, you could find Trina in a deep eternal slumber, further showing the connection. Which, side note, this may have also inadvertently solved the Marika Radagon conundrum by showing us that two identities in the same body can indeed coexist. Although admittedly that is just speculation. Regardless, talking with her reveals that she wants us to stop Miquella, but she has no hatred for him because she is the loving part of his body, so she opposes him out of love. She believes that Miquella ascending to godhood would be a prison, and doesn't want him to suffer for it. Due to Tiolier's infatuation with her, he will join us in this fight in the name of Saint Trina. So at most, this fight can become a 5v3 or 4 if you use a summon. It is a massive brawl, but it does end with you and your allies coming out on top. At the very top of the stairs is the final boss of the DLC, the now revived consort Radahn, with Miquella joining him in the second phase. But this info we already saw coming. What's more important is what happens after, as a flashback will play of Miquella telling Radahn that if they honor the part of their vow, he must be his consort. Radahn's new armor says, quote, "When Melania let the rot flower blossom in Aeonia, Radahn heard a murmur in his ear. Miquella awaits thee, O promised consort." This is referring to the fight seen in both the opening cinematic and the initial release trailer over 2 years ago. This confirms that both Radahn and Malenia were aware of Mikola's goal and that a vow was put in place to honor it. The question remains, what was the vow, and did Radahn agree to it? It's possible that this fight was a part of the vow and that Radahn wanted a grand fight before becoming a consort, but then that calls into question why they both were okay with practically nuking all of Caelid. The fight might have also occurred because Radahn rejected the vow and didn't want to become his consort. But then that also calls into question even more things. Freya, a loyal and close ally to Radahn, says that dying honorably doesn't suit him, but Jiren, his second in command, wants him to die honorably. That was the whole point of the festival. So whose word do we trust? Well, the only person whose word matters most is Radahn, but he doesn't utter a single word throughout the fight. This is also going based off the assumption that the fight between the two is a part of the vow and not some other secret thing we know nothing about. It is also entirely possible that Radahn was charmed in the same way the group was to accept the vow. Mikola's charm powers extend far past his Great Rune, as during the final fight you could be charmed by Mikola to fight for him, causing you to fail. So he can still charm people, it just seems easier to do with the Great Rune intact. Along with all of this, we must ask, what was Mikola's plan? Due to him not having an ending and not showing up until the 11th hour, it's hard to understand what Mikola's intentions were. He calls it an age of compassion, but we don't learn what that's supposed to mean. Compassion definitely has positive connotations to it. Ansbach even says that Mikola fought him with love, and Mikola even requests that we stop fighting and asks us to join him. The only info we have to go off though are his actions. The actions of a demigod who can charm others into doing what he wants, who also divested himself of everything including his emotions in order to ascend to godhood. While that is the end of the main quest, there is still plenty more to go over. There are other stories going on throughout the Shadowlands that are arguably just as important as the main quest. Starting with Mesmer, when he dies he drops an item called Mesmer's Kindling, which is what you use to burn the sealed tree. The description says that like Mesmer, his young sister bore visions of flame. The only character this makes sense with is Melina. Melina's weapon says the one who walks alongside flame shall one day meet the road of destined death. Melina also says that she was born at the foot of the Erdtree, where her mother gave her purpose. It's been widely speculated that Marika is Melina's mother, which if true would provide more evidence for this new theory that these two are siblings. Many have also pointed out that the spell Melina uses in the fight with Morgoth is similar to the minor Erdtree incantation we find in the DLC, again giving more credence to the theory. Speaking of weird family ties, Godwyn makes another brief appearance within the catacombs of the DLC. The bosses of these catacombs are Death Knights, Godwyn's personal guard who now protect the cadaver surrogates of the Prince of Death. Now, this doesn't seem to imply that Godwyn is physically here too, as the main game has shown multiple times that his new grotesque face is everywhere. It shows up both in the Deeproot Depths and underneath Stormvale Castle, and the Prince of Death talisman itself shows two faces as well. Godwyn is gone. Long gone, ever since he was killed on the Night of the Black Knives. This is seemingly here to show how far the corruption of his body has spread, and that his knights are ready for the Age of Duskborn, the same name as Fia's ending, which is of course tied to Godwyn's death. Continuing the theme of death, an area to the east is the Abyssal Woods, which is covered in Frenzy Flame scarring. At the heart of this location is Midra, who we learn is a Lord of Frenzied Flame. Surrounding the area are Inquisitors from Belarut who seem to have punished Midra for this act. The sword he uses, called the Great Sword of Damnation, refers to barbs that pierce the victim from within. Barbs are also mentioned in the description of various Inquisition spells, the same ones they attack you with. It seems as though Midra accepted the power of the Frenzied Flame and the Inquisitors were sent to deal with this heresy. A ghost here at this manor questioned why he was being punished and what great crime Midra committed to allow such an act to happen to him. The map of the area also states that this is off limits to all Hornsent, so it's pretty clear that they despise the Frenzied Flame and are actively working to quell its influence. Midra, despite possibly being a willing participant in this act, seems to be enduring its pain. His partner, learned to be named Nanaya, wanted him to endure the pain so that no one else was hurt, but thanks to us, he decided to let the flame take over. Also towards the east is the Jagged Peak, a land overtaken by drakes and dragons. A priestess of the Dragon Communion can be found who drops a massive bombshell on us, and that's that the drake who occupies this land named Bale is the one who wounded Lord Placidusax. The Old Lord's talisman in Farm Majula depicts Placidusax with 4 heads, but from his design it's clear a couple are missing. Bale was the one who caused this injury, but he didn't leave unscathed as they both dealt each other grievous injuries. The priestess, named Florisax, explains that the Dragon Communion is used to sacrifice and devour the hearts of Bale's kind. So the whole point of the Dragon Communion site seems to be centered around defeating Bale and his offspring. Even if it is minor, it's really nice to finally get an answer on Placidusax's wounds. And finally, the biggest lore revelation comes from Count Ymir. His questline involves us going to various finger ruins, only to learn that there is a finger ruin underneath his cathedral. Exploring it reveals a boss called Matir, Mother of Fingers, whose remembrance says quite bluntly that Matir is the mother of all two fingers and finger creepers, is a daughter of the Greater Will, and was the first shooting star to fall upon the lands between. Its staff also says that it receives signals from the Greater Will beyond the microcosm, but hasn't received a message in quite a while. Wow, that is a lot to take in. This seems to imply that the Greater Will is the creator of the universe. It was thought to be another outer god like the Frenzied Flame or Formless Mother, but it's clear that its existence is much larger than that. This also implies that everything that's occurred in the game regarding the fingers was Matir and not the Greater Will. When we are blocked by the thorns at the foot of the Erdtree, the two fingers seize up and refuse to speak as they're currently trying to communicate with the Greater Will. But the Greater Will wasn't communicating with Matir, and Matir is the mother of the two fingers, so this whole time we were communicating with the wrong being. This also creates massive problems for both the two fingers and Marika, as everything regarding the Golden Order has been based on its word, and Matir seems to be winging it while waiting for the Greater Will to respond. Ymir himself even says that Marika and the two fingers who guided her were unsound from the start. The only detail left from this discovery is the three fingers. They are the only three fingers in the game and seemingly not born from Matir, so the question remains, where did they come from? Could it have been some kind of abnormal birth defect, or was it part of the Frenzied Flame's influence? I'm personally not too sure. But this wraps up all the miscellaneous info I came across. Apologies if that was rather disjointed, but hopefully I was able to convey the story well enough despite that. But that officially brings us to the end of Shadow of the Erdtree. As I mentioned at the top of this video, I'll be making a more in-depth analysis of Elden Ring in a couple of weeks that will encompass the lore of both the base game and the DLC. Both sets of content have lots of small obscure things to discuss, as well as various themes and imagery that need to be talked about, but I wanted to just focus on the basics for this DLC video. In the meantime, while you wait for that video, if you enjoyed this and have an interest in any story-related content like this, feel free to like and subscribe for more. As always, thank you to my returning viewers for coming back to another video, and take care everyone. Goodbye.